I've seen way too many creators dump a $150 budget monitor on a project, only to discover a color shift after a few weeks and a hissy fit when they try to connect it to a MacBook. The regret that follows feels almost inevitable when you chase the lowest price without checking what actually matters for creative work. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So the question is, does the BenQ PD2732U feel like a smarter buy, or is it just another overpriced screen that looks good on paper? First off, let's talk about the kind of decision fatigue that hits you when you're hunting a monitor for design, video editing, or photography. You have a sea of specs: 4K resolution, HDR, refresh rates, USB-C power delivery, yet none of those numbers tell you how the monitor behaves when you're sitting at a desk for 8 hours, tweaking a color grade, or scrolling through a client's branding guide. The real pain point is the risk of spending a solid four-figure sum on a device that looks perfect in a spec sheet but turns out to be a nightmare when you actually need it to be reliable, consistent, and easy to integrate into a Mac-centric workflow. That's why the BenQ PD2732U caught my eye. It markets itself as a creator-ready monitor, promising accurate and consistent color straight out of the box, uniformity calibration across the panel, and a Thunderbolt 4 hub that should simplify cabling for anyone using a MacBook Pro or a Windows workstation. The price lands in the $900-$1,000 range, which is definitely a step up from the budget segment, but it also puts the unit squarely in the territory where you expect real professional value, not just glossy marketing language. Who should consider this monitor? If you are a graphic designer who spends a lot of time in Photoshop or Illustrator, a video editor working with Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, or a photographer who needs AdobeRGB and DisplayP3 coverage for accurate prints, the PD2732U checks a lot of boxes. Its 27-inch 4K panel gives you that pixel-dense canvas where you can see fine details without constantly zooming in. The factory calibration is a genuine time-saver. You can trust that the whites are neutral and the primaries sit where the sRGB and DCI-P3 gamuts claim they are. For anyone who has ever had to run a separate hardware calibrator and then wrestle with ICC profiles, that out-of-the-box accuracy is a noticeable convenience. On the flip side, if you are a gamer who cares about 144 Hz refresh rates, or a casual user whose work never leaves the realm of Word documents and web browsing, the PD2732U is overkill. The monitor's 60 Hz panel is fine for creative tasks, but it won't satisfy anyone looking for buttery smooth motion in fast-paced games. Likewise, if you already own a calibrated external colorimeter and you're comfortable tweaking curves and gamma yourself, you might not need a factory-calibrated panel, though you'll still benefit from the uniformity calibration that BenQ baked in. Let's dig into the practical strengths that actually show up in daily use. The Thunderbolt 4 hub is perhaps the most immediate win. I set up a MacBook Pro, a Windows laptop, and a USB-C external SSD, all plugged into the monitor, and I was able to switch between devices with a single button press on the monitor's OSD. That eliminated a tangle of dongles and gave me up to 90 W of power delivery, which means I could keep my laptop charged while I was editing video frames. For a creator who moves between a desktop and a laptop throughout the day, that flexibility translates directly into less desk clutter and fewer moments of "where's the cable?" Another concrete benefit is the ergonomic stand. The monitor offers height, tilt, swivel, and pivot adjustments, all smoothly motorized. In a typical 9 to 5 editing session, you'll find yourself leaning forward, then stepping back to view the whole timeline, and then maybe rotating the panel for a vertical layout when you're working on mobile UI mockups. The pivot feature, which lets you rotate to portrait mode without needing a separate VESA mount, is a small but surprisingly useful detail that keeps you from having to buy an extra stand or arm. The color performance lives up to the accurate and consistent colors claim. When I compared a side-by-side shot of a reference image on the PD2732U and a cheaper 27-inch 4K monitor I have at home, the PD2732U held the AdobeRGB gamut better, and the shadows didn't crumble into banding. The uniformity calibration also meant that a gray gradient from top to bottom stayed evenly lit, something that matters a lot when you are color grading footage and need to trust that a dark scene isn't artificially brightened by a hot spot. For anyone who has ever complained about the bottom of my screen looks brighter, this monitor's factory-calibrated uniformity is a genuine painkiller. Now, let's be fair and talk about the weaknesses you'll notice once the box is opened. The biggest gripe I encountered was the lack of HDR support beyond a basic HDR10 mode. The panel can display HDR content, but the peak brightness tops out around 300 nits, which is